in my coffee I have milk, honey, cinnamon, and coconut oil. What do you have in your coffee?
Nothing.
We also have pumpkin chocolate chip waffles that were made with coconut oil instead of butter, so that means they're automatically healthy. So we have our snacks, and we're going to talk about some things because April is World Poetry Month and also Sexual Assault Awareness Month with Denim Day on the 27th. So we're going to talk about writing and literature and music and TV and films and stuff that deal with sexual assault and trauma. And we're gonna eat our waffles, because if we eat the waffles, we won't be sad about it. So I have a bunch of book and writing recommendations, and you have music recommendations, because you're a musician.
We sing about angsty teen problems, like objectification.
Like systematic boy problems.
Yeah.
I don't think that you can talk about trauma and poetry without talking about Maya Angelou. If you haven't read Why the Caged Bird Sings, like her memoir, one of her memoirs, you have to. Like, it's required reading. There's media that deals with trauma and abuse, and then there's media that we consume to deal with trauma and abuse. I would say that Maya Angelou honestly falls into both of those categories, because like reading her is educating, but it also like makes you feel good.
And I think there's also like, as well as that, there's two sort of ways to like deal with the repercussions of being like a victim of abuse. You need to read things that like make you feel like, oh, other people have experienced this and therefore I feel empowered. And sometimes there's stuff that you want to like experience where it's like, I want to like soak in all of this sort of like sadness, and I just want to sort of like
give it space.
So there's songs like Candy Says by Lou Reed in the Velvet Underground, who is not like a great person, but he really accurately described the sort of self-hatred that comes with like the trans experience, especially in the 60s.
That sort of music for me is like Mitski. She makes very good music for crying in the shower. More to do with poetry. I have a little playlist, I guess, that you can click through and look at and read different poems that I've selected. So there's Maya Angelou, June Jordan, and Carson, and Lucille Clifton. Anne Carson is really good for like, hey, don't think about that. Think about Rome. They have a little playlist of music that they put together.
There are some dance songs.
So we talked about poetry and music a little bit. Ooh, I have such visceral memories of reading The Lovely Bones. In my 6th grade English class, one girl got a copy of it from like her older cousin, and she gave the book to me, and I gave the book to another girl, and like the entire like 6th grade English class had read it by the end of the month, and we were all walking around terrified. Sometimes we would just look at each other and say like page 7, because that's when things go downhill.
That's like such an interesting like early form of camaraderie.
Young adult fiction writers, especially when they're writing about abuse and trauma, have a responsibility to their readers to have some sort of hope in their novel, because like there's other books that I can't remember the names of. I don't want to say fad, but like it was very popular when we were in middle school, and there were all of those books that were coming out about like this girl was kidnapped and brutalized and then she dies at the end.
Yeah.
The end, no hope. Like especially when you're dealing with like 12 to 17-year-olds, because we can talk about those because we're both 18 now and we're smarter than you. You have to have some sort of light in your plot.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's really depressing. Coraline was one of like the first books that I read that dealt with like girls being sad. Coraline also presents like a very powerful representation of female abusers.
I've watched the movie. I own the movie too.
Yeah.
And I watched it all the time because, you know, it does have that sort of fantastical element to it. But
it's such like a heroine too.
Coraline was this like outspoken little girl that like wasn't listened to, and in the end, she was listened to.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thesis of the whole book. Is listen to children.
I think that one of my favorite male authors who wrote about abuse is John Darnielle, who wrote the book Wolf and White Van, and he also has, you know, his band The Mountain Goats. It starts with the character trying to commit suicide, so it's him living with sort of disfiguration from this thing that he wanted to do.
I really love this book, Perks of Being a Wallflower. You know, you might not like guess it from reading the back of the book or like looking at the commercial, with all those actors in it. It's a book from the perspective of a boy who survived sexual assault and being molested, and like I hate so much that people make fun of that book. It's so rare to have boys being allowed to be emotional and tender and like cry about things that have happened to them. So yeah, let's make fun of it because I don't like this out of context quote.
I think what like the real moral of like making fun of Percy being a wallflower is just like
you're a terrible person and I hate
also
you,
like
and we're gonna fight.
And also it's just sort of like the commodification of like the one sort of cheesy line. Are those like cheesy lines really gonna harm you that much to like have a narrative from the point of view that like is never
That's so
discussed?
rarely seen. Yeah, like we've all had like very, you know, pretentious thoughts when we're 14. It happens. It's okay. It's part of being a child.
If you think that you're being pretentious or cheesy, just get it out there. Write it out on a piece of paper. Manifest those like feelings that you have and know that they are real and
valid. Just as you can't talk about poetry without talking about Maya Angelou, you can't talk about fiction novels without talking about Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. Maya Angelou's poetry actually figures very largely towards the end of the book. There's so many beautiful literary devices that are utilized perfectly in this book. The sexual assault scenes, like the actual physical scenes in, you know, many of these books that we're talking about, it's graphic and like actual survivors can't read it or read that book or think about that book without like getting triggered and not being able to finish the rest of the novel. But I don't feel that that's the case with Speak because it utilizes like Caesura and enjambment, right? My favorite contemporary female artist is M. Carroll, who actually did the graphic novel version of Speak. She makes comics that deal with abuse and trauma in sometimes allegorical ways, and her artwork is so beautiful and haunting. So moving from all of that into nonfiction. Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. I bought it for myself for my birthday.
Everyone on YouTube talked about it.
Yeah, shut up! I've noticed like a lot in her essays, she'll start with like a personal anecdote and then she'll talk about, you know, whatever piece of culture she's looking at and then she'll relate it to the anecdote, and that's kind of how she winds it down with like a much wider view of the world. It's such a good way to introduce people to activism and feminism.
I think reassuring writing is like very important, like the sort of writing that's like, this is something that happened, and it sucks
and
beyond
I see
belief.
You.
Yeah, and I see you, and I love you, and I feel you. Yeah.
So closing out on that theme of reassurance and seeing other people and everyone being there for each other, We Believe You is coming out on April 12th, and it is a collection of stories from survivors of on-campus sexual assault that's kind of coming out in a partnership with The Hunting Ground, which is the documentary about on-campus assault, which is what we are gonna watch right now.
Woo!
And we're gonna have my cat and a lot of chocolate while we watch it, and some sheet masks to hide our tears.
Yep.
Today's fact is that we're here for you, and that there's many artists and musicians and writers that are also here for you, and give us some more recommendations of media that deals with trauma that you like in the comment section below.
And also be sure to talk about your own stories in the comments.
Later, nerds! Crying is good for you because it gets all of the stress hormones out of your system.
And it's good for your skin.
Yeah, I told you that.
Yeah, probably.